This is The Speaking Show. I'm David Newman, and you're tuned in to the #1 podcast for speakers, consultants, and experts who want to speak more profitably. I hope you're sitting down, and if you are sitting down, I almost guarantee you're not sitting down the right way. And my guest is Alison Heller-Ono, who's going to help you with that and so much more. Welcome to the show, Alison.
Thanks so much, David. Yep, you're right. Most people aren't sitting right.
And we don't care where they're sitting. They're sitting wrong. Let's just face facts here. But they're doing all kinds of other things wrong. They're working wrong. They're sitting wrong. They're standing wrong. They're not optimizing their workspace. So you are in the area of ergonomics. Give us a little backstory and tell us how that came to be your thing. And what were some of the highlights of the professional journey that brought you to where you are?
Wow, that's a great question. It goes back a long way to when I was a physical therapist, just starting my career. And I've always been interested in how people work. But I didn't know about ergonomics back in the mid to late 80s when I started my career as a physical therapist. My first job, I realized a lot of people came in with back pain. And I would treat them for their injuries, and they were usually work-related injuries. And over the next few years, as becoming a more experienced physical therapist, I noticed trends in people coming in with a lot of work injuries. And I would ask them, how did you get hurt at work? And did your employer ever do anything to help you work safer and more efficiently? And the answer was always, no, my employer didn't help me. And that's pretty much how I got this injury, So it's really my work as a physical therapist that opened the door to the science of ergonomics. And it's been a passion and a love affair ever since. I love how people work.
So let's just back up half a step, because I think, we kind of think we know what ergonomics means. We've probably seen those charts where it's like, okay, here's your chair relative to your desk, relative to your computer. But it's way more than that. There's a lot more going on. What is ergonomics? What is the study and the discipline and the science of what that is? And then let's talk about some ways that you help companies and executives and individuals to really apply that so that they do get better outcomes from their team, both on-site and off-site, both virtual and in the office. But let's back up. I realize I asked you 17 questions all at once there. Let's start with, what is ergonomics for the layperson?
Ergonomics is the study of how people work. It's a science, and it's the science of fit. So I like to put it in simple terms. It's like the human and the machine interface. So it's actually human-centered design. So it's like a puzzle. So work must be designed to fit the human. And I like to say that ergonomics is the relationship between you and your work environment. So that includes the tools and materials you handle, the tasks that you perform in the environment in which you perform it in. So it's actually a system. And that system can be just you at your workstation, or it could be 30 people in a department at each of their workstations, or it could be a production line or a laboratory environment, or it could be you taking groceries out of the back of your car, because that is work. So wherever people are performing work, there's always a relationship between what you're doing, the tools you're using, what you're handling, in the environment in which you're doing it in.
Now, you have many, many different ways that you work with companies and with individuals. Let's talk about just the very beginnings of your business. So you started out just doing a lot of on-site consulting, right? And so the service was pretty much you before you had all the great books and courses and all kinds of other cool things we're going to talk about. How did that evolve from Alison, the ergonomics expert, coming into the company, making sure this was all copacetic, to all the tools and courses and certifications that you now provide to others?
It was a progression really from the clinic into the consulting and on-site. So from in the clinic and, like I said, working with injured workers and realizing that employers didn't know how to create a safe workplace and the employees didn't know how to work safely. But as a physical therapist, I knew how to prevent injuries. I knew how to help people work with better body mechanics, how to have better posture, how to move more effectively and safely to avoid injury. And so those patients really unlocked the door to letting me into employers. So I would see a lot of workers' comp injuries. And so from that, I would be able to reach out to the employer and say, I have some strategies and some opportunities that might provide you some insight into how to prevent this from happening to other employees in your workplace. And just simply by calling and talking to them in that way, opened the door and allowed me to come in and to observe how people were working and then interact with the employer and provide solutions to help them change how people were working. Because that's really what an ergonomist will do. We drive change in an organization. I like to think of ergonomics as the medium in which to do it. So because it's a system, it's not really transactional. It can be. Much of my business is transactional. That means I come in, I look at one person, how they work, write a report and complete it, and then, submit it to the employer. And there's not really any action after that necessarily. But if you look at ergonomics as a systems approach from an organizational level, it has tremendous impact throughout to like health, safety, wellness, efficiency, and productivity. And these are the successful outcomes of ergonomics. It's not just the individual in the workplace, because if you have 20 people doing the same job and one person got hurt doing that job, then believe me, the other people have the same risk exposure. So treating or just evaluating one person doesn't really solve the problem necessarily.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you next, because your website is Worksite International. We're going to give people all these links and resources and goodies at the end. But as we're browsing through there, you have some very compelling reasons, organizational reasons, that people should be really taking a closer look at this, whether that is ADA, right? So the Americans with Disabilities Act and the compliance and the kind of things that we have to keep in mind to remain ADA compliant. You mentioned already workmen's compensation issues. I'm sure there's a benefits cost containment when someone throws out their back or there's injuries. And of course, the more injuries you report to your health insurance company, the more the insurance premiums go up. And that just gets bigger and bigger if you have thousands or tens of thousands of workers. So there's real financial implications to ignoring this or just hoping people will figure it out on their own, correct?
Absolutely, David. I've studied and documented the return on investment of ergonomics for employers. So they realize that there is a cost benefit and a huge return on the investment. So, for example, in the state of California, where I live, the average cost of one workers' comp claim for a seated worker performing pretty much sedentary computer type tasks is about $40,000 for a workers' comp claim. Now, a back injury, about $55,000 in today's marketplace. So when you're looking at those kinds of costs, it can be devastating for your premiums. And historically, insurance is based on 3 years of history of injuries. So if you don't respond and do something, those costs continue to accrue and wreak havoc on your premiums. So the
Exactly.
ROI, we can help employers determine what our services as an ergonomist will save them. We can actually do predictive analytics to help them.
Now, let's also we'll go behind the scenes a little bit with your thought leadership business, and we'll get back to the ergonomics of ergonomics in a moment. But you have such a tremendous wealth of online resources, online assets, courses, certification programs where you will certify a client or a client employee who's interested in doing this for their company. How did you start to build that online empire, going from Alison does the work to Alison teaches the work to Alison has some self-service and some guided and some higher level ways that people can engage with this that really multiply and amplify what you do way beyond just what you can do on your own?
Yeah, that's been one of my goals over the last 20 years of my career is how do I scale myself, So just going back from the first few contracts I had were really systems approach to ergonomics, the organizational approach to ergonomics. We call that macro ergonomics. So the one-on-one eval is a micro ergonomic assessment, where the macro is the organizational approach. And early on in my business, when I first started, one of the first contracts I got was organizationally to work with the Monterey County Sheriff's Office, a large government agency, to help them implement ergonomics in the workplace. And part of that strategy was a team approach internally to teach in-house evaluators. So I developed a train the evaluator technique, train the ergonomics evaluator. And I continued with that for the last 20 years live. But in about 2015, 2016, soon after I met you, David, I realized that the online world was a place where I could literally put my legacy. I could build a portal, I could catalog my courses. And it wasn't just the Train the Ergonomics Evaluator. I was teaching office ergonomics, working in comfort, laboratory ergonomics, foundations of lab ergonomics. I was teaching supervisory courses in workers' comp and disability management using ergonomic strategies. I mean, I've been speaking and teaching for the last 27 years of my business because no one will learn about ergonomics unless you talk about it, right? So I realized after 20 or so years, I have this, robust library of my body of work, essentially. And once I learned about online systems and online training, I just jumped on that bandwagon around 2017. And it's been fantastic ever since. So I've cataloged my courses, I've put them into the Worksite International Ergonomics Training Academy. And now I have two tracks of learning, one for employers for their employees. And those are typically like 1 hour long courses. They don't take a lot of time, but they're high impact. Employees that are provided with actionable strategies, self-care tips, safe work practices, things that don't cost an employer anything other than the training itself. And then the professional track, which is where I have put my certification courses like the Train the Ergonomics Evaluator. I have a chair assessment specialist course for purchasing and what the facilities folks that have to select furniture for employers. Also for chair vendors who sell chairs to employers. And so I'm developing that full line of professional as well as employee track learning.
Hey, good looking. Are you currently getting paid to speak? Would you like to ramp that up? We can help. Book a confidential speaker strategy call with our team at doitmarketing.com/call, and let's see what we might do together. The call is free, but the results may be priceless. Let me talk about your book, and I think I have news for you. I'm not sure if you're aware of this or not, but one of your books is on Amazon, and I don't want anyone to go there because I know you can't afford it. It is selling for $971.90. Were you aware of this?
I look periodically at it. I wrote it in 1999 after about 6 years of doing these macro ergonomics processes for employers. So, yeah, that's quite a hefty price because it's a binder with 7 team workbooks. It certainly didn't start off at that cost. And,
right. Well,
and of course, it's not a bestseller, that's for sure.
There is one in stock, and this is, we're talking about your guide to developing ergonomics process.
Yes.
$971.90. I've had like 100 plus authors on here. You have the highest priced book.
That's amazing.
I know. So while we're on the topic of the book, what is an ergonomics process? I think people have heard of ergonomics, but this might be news to some people about an ergonomics process.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier about ergonomics being a medium to drive change in an organization. So an ergonomics process is one that is integrated through day-to-day operations of the business. So all decisions that you make around human resources, around facilities, around process design, setting up of your assembly processes, health management, wellness management, you can use ergonomics as part of those decision-making strategies because ergonomics is human-centered. It keeps a focus on what you expect and what those outcomes you want for people. So it's really integral, it becomes integral to many decisions. In particular, let's say you were going to buy chairs for a setup of a new startup company. and you don't know anything about buying chairs. So, but if you understand the science of ergonomics, then consulting with an ergonomist to help you with facility planning from the beginning, to work with the architect, to work with the interior designer, to select things that are human centered and will be adjustable to fit the most people in your organization as possible. So that's an example of an ergonomics process in just that situation. The way we have applied it with our customers, an employer, I used to work at the county. I was the ergonomics manager for about 6.5 years. And matter of fact, they hired me because I brought my book with me to the interview and they were looking for an ergonomics manager. And I said, well, I wrote the book on your guide to developing an ergonomics process. So I got the job. So for 6.5 years, I took that system and integrated into a preventive strategy where employees could request evaluations proactively when they were just either having mild discomfort or they just needed help with workstation setup, or even they had progressive symptoms. So the process there was an employee-driven process where employees would request evaluations. They would do some training online or live, and then they would do a self-assessment so that they would reflect on their own needs. And that data would come to me as the ergonomics manager. I would review it, and then I'd triage it and decide what kind of evaluation would be necessary: a preventive eval, a new hire eval, one for workers' comp, one for medical management, disability management. And we would do that service internally. Employees would have a professional evaluation, and then we would get a report. We'd implement the solutions, which might be purchasing products for employees. It might be providing additional training. It might be some job modifications. And then we would follow back up after that to determine success. Now, I did that for about 6.5 years with the county and tracked the outcomes, David. And earlier we were talking about return on investment. Guess how much money we saved over 6 years doing that kinds of process?
I'm ready.
Well, it's more than my book. But for every dollar they invest in that process, they save $10. And over a 5-year period, they saved over $15 million in workers' compensation claim avoidance. So what we learned from that 5 years, I studied it over 5, I tracked the outcomes for 5 years and documented the results. For every 100 people we saw proactively, 95 of them never filed a claim. So only 5% ever went to claim over the 5-year period. So we had a drastic reduction in workers' compensation filings, resulting in that claim avoidance and turning around that ROI of about $15 million. It was fascinating. So that's another example of a larger ergonomics process. That's a very, very powerful tool, strategy, whatever you want to call it, to maximize employee performance.
I just want to make it clear that, most people these days think of ergonomics in terms of an office, right? White collar work, office, desk chair, lamp, computer. But you mentioned earlier that you also work in some industrial settings, manufacturing, warehouse type settings. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Basically, I have a lot of very deep skills and knowledge in ergonomics, but very broad also. Because I got into the marketplace early on in 1993, I mean, when we used to call things VDTs, video display terminals, and they were those large, clunky monitors. Anyway, I'm kind of a pioneer in the ergonomics consulting industry, especially out here in California. There were very few consultants back then. So it really gave me a broad opportunity to do a lot of different things. And I also do some contracted work with larger insurance companies through their risk management or loss control divisions. And so those opportunities get me into a lot of unique manufacturing, assembly, and other types of material handling, manual material handling type jobs. So the last couple of years, I've had a great opportunity to work with some companies that do temporary sourcing of employees to the airline industry and airports. So I have been able to go to Atlanta Hartsfield Airport, LAX, Miami International, and help with the analysis of baggage handlers, luggage handlers, of cabin cleaners. Of course, these jobs are very important in the airline industry. Lots of industry and, low-income wage earners, but extremely important jobs. So protecting those workers was a wonderful opportunity to help analyze how they're handling luggage, the process behind that, and helping employers develop strategies that are low cost, progressive, and high impact. So that's a good example of them.
Well, that's where I was going to go next, because as I'm hearing you say, if they're buying new furniture, if they're buying new chairs, if they're redesigning an office, I'm sure some people listening are like, oh my gosh, I know we need to do that, but this is a terrible time to do that. We can't afford it. We're not going to throw out all of our desks and chairs and office furniture. It's fairly unusual, I'm guessing, that you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and you don't need to say, oh, everyone needs new $2,000 chairs. Everyone needs to have state-of-the-art offices and desks and workstations. So you can work with what they have and optimize that, or you can make recommendations for some small upgrades that would not be throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Yes, exactly, David. I mean, I provide my clients a progressive list of, from no cost to low cost to administrative and job rotation, task rotation strategies, things that really can change how people work. And that fundamentally goes back to the definition, which ergonomics is really a change driver, as I'd mentioned earlier. One thing I like to say, this is one of I call them Allie-isms, is we all know how to do our jobs, but no one has ever taught us how to work with good ergonomics. And in my opinion, ergonomics isn't common sense. It must be commonly taught and commonly practiced, and we're just not there yet. So as an ergonomist, I have an opportunity to come in and teach people to be more mindful and aware of how they're working and then how to change those work practices. So a great example with what you're saying is that most employers provide pretty reasonable equipment, even if it's imported and maybe they spend a couple $100s on a chair. But those chairs have adjustability. It's just people don't know how to use the products effectively. And so I spend a lot of time when I do my one-on-one assessments showing people how to use the equipment and tools their employers provided them more effectively and more efficiently. And I can tell you that we solve probably 85% to 90% of the employees' concerns by showing them how to use what they have correctly, more effectively, and combining that with better work practice strategies, like getting up more often, being mindful of sitting correctly. I mean, that's like the number one thing is if you would sit right, use your chair right, that would solve a lot of problems. Raising it up so you reach the desk height a little, reach the keyboard and mouse better technique with keyboard and mousing. You wouldn't think of it, but people do not know how to use their mouse correctly, David. And it's such a benign thing, sitting at a keyboard and mouse and using those with your hands. But the problems that can develop from improper use and pain and discomfort.
What a great episode. Wowza. Tell you what, if you want to ramp up your revenue as an expert who speaks professionally, you should really check out our free online training at doitmarketing.com/webinar. Well, let's talk about the pain and discomfort of a lot of people working from home where their setup is even worse. The setup is even worse, Allison. What the heck? So I know you've always consulted with folks that have remote sales teams, remote customer service. This whole working remote is not new. I think the scale and the scope of working remote now, we're just recording this sort of in the middle of this COVID-19 crisis where a lot of quarantine, a lot of isolation, no one's working in a traditional office anymore. And it's 100% work from home, work remote. And we're going to come back from that, obviously. But you have some special services and some special things that you can help people that have hundreds or thousands of people working remotely. What are some ways that we screw this up when we're working in a home office environment?
Well, to be trendy with the times, I'm going to say the number one thing is social distance yourself from your laptop. And when I say that, what I mean is, the laptop is like a book. It's a folding book that has a keyboard on one side and the monitor on the other. And if you use it as a single piece of equipment, then it's going to really cause problems to your neck and shoulders because you're going to be looking down all the time. It could result in headaches, postural strain, and then your hands are stuck on this little 12-inch keyboard, And so a person like your size, your hands are much larger than mine. I have about a 6-inch hand, so I don't mind a small keyboard on my laptop. But you're going to be much better off if you social distance yourself from your laptop. And what I mean by that is just get a separate keyboard and a separate mouse and raise your laptop up on a stack of books, 6 to 8 inches high, so that the monitor on the laptop is directly across from you. And keeping that keyboard and mouse set on a surface that's about equal to your elbow height when you're sitting with your feet on your floor. And your arms are bent at a right angle. The keyboard and mouse should be right under your fingertips. And you really want to float your wrists and hands. You don't want to lean on the surface when you're using these devices. So this is probably one of the most important things you could do if you're working from home is, see if you can get your employer to ship out a keyboard and mouse to you, or if you can get out to, the local office supply store to pick one up. They're about, $30 to $50 for a set. And at this point, many people are probably going to continue to work from home. Those with children who can't go back because their kids aren't in school yet will continue to work from home. So it'll probably be a staggered return to work where employers will bring back most essentials and maybe staggered Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. Half the team is there, and then Tuesday, Thursday, the other half, and so forth. So I think, working from laptops, working from home is really going to be something I think that's going to continue far into our future. You mentioned about some of the products that we have developed for that. So I like to call myself the home ergonomist because I've had a lot of experience helping people set up their home offices. And so we have a online coaching service as well as a consultation. The difference between those, the coaching is about 20 minutes of just some mindful discussion of your work practices and how you can improve, a little bit about your equipment use. But if you want to go into deeper dive and you feel like you want to invest in some new furniture, a better chair, then we do that through a consultation. And we do use video technology, and we can make it very objective through that. And you can see how I can position myself. You can mirror what I'm doing, and I can demonstrate different products to you online. So it's become very interactive, and I've really enjoyed doing them recently over the last, couple months. It's definitely been a trend. So aside from just the individual coaching or consultation, we also offer live virtual seminars. We call those Work at Home Ergonomics. And those can be offered to companies who have, 100 or more people that they'd like to participate nationally or globally. And that can be recorded and put into our portal for them or just delivered live. So we have a lot of options now for the work at home workforce. And I'm very excited about it. We're getting great feedback from employees because they are able to come up with strategies at no cost that they can do right away, like that laptop fix just by raising it up on some of those do it speaking and do it marketing books would be great. Right? And other low cost or no cost ways. Not only that, it can help them help their families as well. Because once you learn about ergonomics, it's something you can share with others.
It's the gift that keeps on giving.
It is. It is the gift that keeps on
I'll tell you, this is no joke, though. I mean, this whole back pain and, aches and pains and neck pain, it is serious. So I'm looking at this as an individual consumer, right? What are you spending on massage? What are you spending on CBD oil? What are you spending on pain reliever? Well, what are you doing to your body? And that is permanent damage that you do not need to be doing. So rather than do the damage and then spend all the time, money, effort, energy to undo the damage, how about you listen to Alison and don't do the damage in the first place?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, as a PT ergonomist, you get the best of both worlds from me because I can help you with those musculoskeletal aches and pains from my experiences as a PT for over 33 years. And then the science of ergonomics, it's just such a great fit together, PT and ergonomics.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to ask you two final questions. My final question is, how do people get connected and stay connected to more Alison Heller-Ono brilliance? But before we get to that, my second to last question, Alison, if people were to take one central idea, one core takeaway from our conversation today, what would you hope that would be?
Well, I think the most important thing is that you need to recognize that what you do has an impact. The way you work has an impact on you. And here's another Allieism. You're always comfortable before you have pain. So you may be working awkwardly and you may be working like that all the time and you may not really care, but eventually you will care. And that's because of the nature of cumulative trauma. So cumulative trauma is the biomechanical forces like repetition or forceful exertion or postural stress like slouching or sitting unsupported. The more you do that over and over, it eventually will have an impact and will catch up with you. And I want you to think of it not just from your own perspective, but your child's perspective as well. If you have kids, they're spending more and more time on technology now. Close focus, it's going to impact your eyes. It's going to impact your spine, your muscle development. You cannot sit all day, 8 to 10 hours going from webinar or virtual meeting to webinar to online conference. You must move. The body is made to move. And that's the number one thing as an ergonomist PT that we really emphasize is that you cannot stay in the same position for an extended period of time and not expect it to have an impact on you. So I think, David, we're made to move. I think that people need to recognize that if you have discomfort, it's a warning sign, and you need to look at how you're working, look at the tools you're using, the tasks that you're performing, how long you're performing them, and to what intensity, and change it. Do something to change it. I think that would be what I'd like to say.
And it sounds like if you're a company executive and you don't just have one body, but you've got thousands or tens of thousands of bodies, this is 10,000 times more important.
It is. And just our conversation here, I hope that the listeners realize that ergonomics is an important part of how we work. It is the science of work and the fit of work environment to the human. And so it does have an impact. It has a financial impact. It has a moral impact, and it has a physical impact on people as well as cognitive, what you think about how you're working, your satisfaction level, your morale. It's so critical to running a good organization. And that's really where that ergonomics process design concept comes in as well. So it's not just about the individual, but it's about the organization as well.
Amen times 10. Now, how do people get connected and stay connected to more Alison Heller-Ono brilliance? Where can we send people? Websites, resources, links, where shall we send them?
Well, of course, my website, which is www.worksiteinternational.com, and it's all spelled out, WORKSITE International. And then you can find me on Facebook under Worksite International and on LinkedIn under Alison Heller-Ono. I'm also on Twitter as, I think, Ali at Ergonomics. And so those are the main places. Now, I have a wonderful blog that I put out at worksiteinternational.com. You can get on my mailing list there. And I have some exceptional resources around a lot of the things that we spoke about today that are free downloads, including my book, Ergonomic Principles Every Business Needs to Know for Office and Material Handling Success. And this is a great little guide, ebook that employers can download for free and really get a good overview of everything that we've talked about here today. A little bit more in depth, though. And
they better get that because otherwise they have to pay $971. So get over there, my friends, worksiteinternational.com. Alison, thank you so much for being on. This was totally fantastic. Awesome, awesome, awesome. All of the links, resources, downloads are going to be linked under this episode. When you go to thespeakingshow.com, you'll find Alison's links, website links, her social media, all that good stuff. And thanks for being on.
Thank you so much, David. Yep, whether you'd like to hear more about ergonomics live or virtual, I'm here for you. I'm here for any listeners. And just reach out at worksiteinternational.com. Or if you'd like to email me, it's AlisonH@worksiteinternational.com. And that's Alison with one L. Thanks so much, David. It's been great speaking with you. And sit right, sit healthy, and be well.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.